Okay, so this week we don't have a deep dive. We don't have any films to review. We are going to be looking at a topic that's getting mentioned quite a lot. I do a lot of radio, and people are asking me all the time, why are films like Contagion and pandemic stories doing very, very well on Netflix, on TV? And that's brought up to me is why films of a dystopian nature are becoming very, very popular at the moment. And I think clearly the answer for me is because all of these stories in the world that we're living with have an ending and usually have an optimistic ending. But that's opened up a category of dystopian films. Why are dystopian films at this moment being very, very popular and being seen to be very popular? And looking back through sort of film history during the 80s, the dystopian science fiction film on the back end of Terminator became very, very popular genre again. And I think that was again down to things like the Cold War and the escalation in the Cold War. So Andy and I have decided to look at dystopian films in general, do a deep cut on several films that we found interesting and exciting. So Andy, what do we see as a literal translation of a dystopian film?
Well, utopian films are the ones in which the future society is perfect and everything is like immaculate and everyone has everything done for them. Dystopia is an imaginary community or society that's undesirable or frightening. And so that blanket description can cover pretty much a huge abundance of sci-fi. But I think what it's mostly related to is that wave of like 60s to 70s kind of dystopian films that came out. Your things like Soylent Green, your Logan's Runs, your Fahrenheit 451, Zardoz. That's
We've
what
got the
most
love for
people
Zardos
associate
in
with
this
it.
house.
That's what a lot of people associate them with. But it's a lot more wide-ranging than that. If we look at the origins of dystopian films, you're looking, the most popular one is 1927's Metropolis, which has had so many re-releases over the years and, been re-engineered because it's iconic. And it's a lot of the modern dystopia films take a lot of influence from that film. That's the whole, the big industrial machine, which is holding up society. The upper echelons of society are living in their big palaces above all the common people on the ground, etc., rebellion, etc. And that has all the concepts in one beautiful film. But it wasn't the first film to be classed as a dystopian film.
Which would that be?
Dr. Mabuse the Gambler, which was an exaggerated portrayal of Germany in which the titular villain can exploit for power and profit. And that was the film that originated the whole dystopian look, the whole Big Brother kind of approach. And speaking of Big Brother, you can't talk about dystopia without mentioning 1984, which has been adapted twice to film and a few times to TV.
Yeah, there was an excellent Peter Cushing TV version, which I saw when the BBC released some of their classic back catalogue as a celebration. And it is a truly disturbing version of 1984. And I think dystopian, as you said, is a blanket term that covers so many different areas, and that's why it does appeal and run through science fiction very well. The idea of a dystopian future and a dystopian film is really a blanket term to talk about lots and lots of issues about society issues and an imaginary communities or a world that ultimately becomes undesirable. And so whether that's down to big business, like Blade Runner to a degree, technological like Blade Runner, ethical, religious, political, economical, cultural, environmental disasters. It really is an overall blanket term that we see as dystopian futures. And so therefore, when I looked at lists of what we consider to be dystopian films, there were films in there that I wouldn't necessarily think of as being the classic dystopian films. I mean, for me, a classic one is a film like A Boy and His Dog, which is based on the Harlan Ellison story, A Boy and His Dog, which focuses on the survival of a boy and his intelligent dog they've got a telepathic connection with in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. One of my all-time favorite film stars, a young Don Johnson. That, to me, is my ideal of a dystopian film. Same with something like Book of Eli. But Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 also fit into the idea of a dystopian future because it's a different interpretation of that particular theme.
Dystopian films are always set in a future, and the future could look bright and perfect, but there's something underlying not right within there. Like you say, the really iconic dystopian films are the ones that tell some kind of political or social message as the underlying theme behind it, without it being too laboured or heavy-handed, it seems like a natural extension of the story. I mean, even films like Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes is a dystopian film.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, even the modern version of it, like, and the original version, how mankind's quest for war decimated mankind, and so the apes rose and took power. In the more modern one, coincidentally, it's a contagion that breaks out and weakens the human race, whilst also helping evolve the primates to become more intelligent and take over.
Yeah, there's an element of genetic manipulation within that as well, which is
They are
again this
cautionary
fear of
tales.
yeah, absolutely, that's the word I was looking for.
Cautionary tales, and like you say, that a lot of the times there's some kind of like positive outcome at the end to give some hope, because it's supposed that they're intended to make you watch them, reflect on them, and relate to them in some way, and go, "Oh my God, we're in that kind of situation." But then at the end, go, "But there is a glimmer of hope at the end of this," and make you think, well, maybe the society that we're in at the moment isn't that bad, and it can get better if we pay attention to these lessons.